This episode of the 46 of 46 podcast is sponsored by Crua Outdoors. Camp comfortably with the world's best insulated tents and outdoors gear. Check out their tents, sleeping bags, pads, and more at cruaoutdoors.com. That's CRUA outdoors.com. Crua Outdoors, the best night's sleep you'll have in the wild. It's 20 degrees out here, and day one of the Northville Placid Trail is officially underway. We're coming up to the Aluska Lean-To, walking along the cold river, and it is raging today. We're here at the Noah John Rondo Hermitage, 2 miles out from Catlin Bay at Long Lake, climbing up towards the scenic viewpoint, and it is steep. We're walking between the Seward and Santanoni ranges right now. Well, it is a winter wonderland back here at Duck Hole. Crossing the suspension bridge over the Sacandaga River, it's a quiet, peaceful evening here at Spruce Lake number 3. Well, we woke up covered in 2 inches of snow here at the Kelly Point Lean-To. Passing the Cedar River flow, sunny day at Stevens Pond. We're building our campfire early here at Silver Lake to fight off the bugs. Wow. Dude, I have no idea how we're going to cross this swamp. Just walking down the road here in Piseco. Well, I guess it's time to take off the boots and cross the West Stony Creek. 1 mile to Lake Placid, 1 mile left to Northville. You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast, the Northville Placid Trail edition. The Northville Placid Trail, Day 8. Silver Lake to Northville, the final day. May 23rd, 2020. It was around 2 a.m. as I slept soundly inside the lean-to here at Silver Lake. Sarah and James sleeping to my right. The woods were lit up from the nearly full moon, so visibility wasn't too bad outside. And I went to bed knowing the temperatures were going to be in the low 50s tonight. A welcomed change from the low 20s and low 30s I've experienced every other night camping out here so far. Then I heard a sound on the top of the lean-to. And as I came to, slightly groggy, I realized what it was. Rain. Despite the clear and amazing weather forecasts during these 2 days, it was raining. So I turned on my flashlight to look out the lean-to, and yes, it was raining all right. And then I had a quick moment of panic as I thought to myself, wait, did I bring my backpack and boots into the lean-to? Shoot, are they still right outside? As I started to stand up out of my sleeping bag to go get my backpack and boots, a little more awake now, alert, and slightly panicked, I saw my boots sitting up on the shelf in the back of the lean-to and my backpack hanging from a nail directly above me. Crisis averted. We're good. Fortunately, I made the smart decision before bed to bring those items inside just in case it rained. But I couldn't remember at this point in the night if I did that or not, since I was half asleep, half awake. But thankfully, all was well, and the sound of the light rain around the woods created a nice ambience here in the middle of the night at Silver Lake. But back to sleep for a few more hours, because I've got a long day ahead of me. Once again, the loons started to cry around 5:30 a.m. as the sun was rising. It's always easier to wake up with the sunrise and the sound of loons when you're outside in the woods, versus when you're asleep in your bed at home. 5:30 a.m. has a different feel out here camping than it does in your own bed. I laid in my sleeping bag for a few more minutes and enjoyed the view of the woods from the shelter. The ground was mostly dry, only slightly damp, so clearly the rain didn't last too long last night, probably just a quick passing cloud. I got up around 5:45 a.m. and started my morning. Sarah also woke up around this point, and then James woke up maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, and we all began getting ready for the big day. I didn't feel too bad this morning, since yesterday's hike was a bit shorter and easier compared to other days out here, at only 15 miles and all on fast-moving terrain. So fortunately, I felt relatively good, all things considered. Relatively good. I went around the lean-to and took down the undisturbed bear bag and started eating breakfast, which was another bagel sandwich with turkey and provolone that I made the morning before at my house. And it lasted just fine in my backpack for 24 hours, and it was a quick and very good breakfast. Plenty of dense carbs and protein to start the 24-mile day on the right foot. James and Sarah made their morning coffee and their breakfast, And then we packed up our camp and started walking away from the Silver Lake lean-to at 7 a.m. on the dot. Today was the day, day 8, and my final day on the Northville Placid Trail. 114 miles down, 24 and a half to go. Northville, we're coming for you. Our plan for this final day was to make the long 24 and a half mile push southbound from Silver Lake all the way to Northville. 12 miles to Woods Lake, lunch, then 12 more miles to the finish line at Waterfront Park in downtown Northville. Today's long journey would take us past a few campsites, Woods Lake, over Benson Road, across the West Stony Creek, past another mud lake, and out of the woods where we'd walk the final 3.5 victory miles to the great Sacandaga Lake in the town of Northville. A big final day on the NPT, but we were determined to finish strong. A nice morning here at Silver Lake. Nice and quiet. We had a very uneventful night. After the night of camping, it was early to bed, and it is just before 7 a.m. and we're going to get started on our big 24-mile day to Northville, the final day of the Northville Placid Trail. Going to pass a bunch of campsites, Woods Lake, and a lot of long stretches with nothing in between till we get to Northville for the final walk along the road. But it's going to be a big day. Here we go. We left the lean-to and started hiking at 7 a.m. as we passed the hammock campers sleeping down by the lake who were just starting to wake up for the morning. And after we talked to them last night, we learned that they had been camping here for a few days, and they hiked into Silver Lake from the Godfrey Road parking lot, which is a little over 7 miles away. We planned to hammer out as many miles as we could early on in the morning, since the bugs were still sleeping and the temperatures were much cooler than the low 80s that we'd experienced later today. Plus, with over 24 miles to hike, it seemed like a better plan to go as fast as we could for the morning portion to get as many miles in before lunch as possible. About 15 minutes into the morning, after climbing up, over, and around multiple blowdown trees that required way too much effort first thing in the morning, we came out to Miko Lake. We're 18 minutes in and we have come to Miko Lake, M-E-C-O, Miko Lake, which actually looks more like a pond. I would call this a pond, and half the times these places are called ponds, I would refer to them as lakes. But we're going to wait till the next river crossing. We're going to fill up our water and then really start trucking towards Northville, south to Northville today. Now, if I was a surveyor way back in the day, the majority of places dubbed a pond here on the NPT, I would have called them a lake. And this lake, Miko Lake, I would have called it a pond. It was quite small, had that brown pond look to it. If only I was exploring the Adirondack Park for the first time back in the 1800s when they named all this stuff. But yes, Miko Lake was a small little body of water south of Silver Lake, which the trail runs along the shore of for a couple hundred yards or so as you wind and weave your way through the woods here in the Silver Lake wilderness. The first couple of miles on the day had us running along lakes and river streams a lot, which was a nice way to start our morning and plenty of places to fill up our water. I'm always the type that when I see a good river for drinking, I'll quickly slam one of my water bottles and refill it because I don't want to be without water. Even though on this trail there's plenty of places to get water constantly, be it scooping raw from the river or pumping at a lake or a small stream. The other James, however, was more interested in having a lighter backpack, and he was kind of riding the lightning most of the day with minimal water to avoid the backpack weight. So we all have our different styles. But Mr. James Griffith is also a complete animal on the trail and completely knows his body and his limits. If you're still figuring that out for yourself, I'd say carry the water as opposed to not carrying the water. But that's my 2 cents. We're currently walking along the Sacandaga River now. Just filled up our water for the foreseeable future. Straight scoop, raw river water out of the fast-flowing Sacandaga. It is safe to drink the backcountry water. So I do, and it's a lot faster when you're filling up. I filter sometimes, but if I can find a fast-flowing river like this, I'm just going to scoop it. But if I can't, or I'm at a lake, that's what the filter's for in my mind. Oh man, do we have a long day ahead of us here. We were walking along the West Branch Sacandaga River before we crossed over it almost 2 miles south of Silver Lake. This river was a truly delicious and nutritious river too, might I add. And this crossing is a rock hop, and it's a good-sized one too, probably 20 or 30 feet across. We arrived here an hour into the day at 8 a.m., and I went first, finding my route across, jumping from one rock to another, and then Sarah went next, and she got halfway across before kind of getting stuck with no good place to go. So instead of turning back, she just confidently stepped off the rock into the water like a superhero and just walked through the water to the other side. Wet feet be damned. It was super badass. Props to you, Sarah. She just went for it. Both Sarah and James were hiking in La Sportiva trail runners, which apparently dry very quickly, whereas I was hiking in my usual Timberland hiking boots that I always wear. And I will say, however, I wish I would have had a lighter shoe for this trail, because it would have been nice to wear a different pair of shoes today rather than put my feet back in these boots. But oh well. Next time. The woods were a nice mix here of both young and old hardwood trees, filled with the new season's leaves as well as giant spruce trees towering above everything. And the trail continued to be a delightful dirt path, easy to navigate along, and the blue NPT trail markers were very easy to spot. We arrived at Rock Lake down to our right and Rock Lake Mountain up to our right around 8:15, just over an hour into the hike from Silver Lake. Towards the end of the lake is the junction to head to the tent campsite, which is marked by a trail sign. The campsite is 0.1 miles off the trail. Rock Lake tent campsite turnoff, which is 0.1 miles off the trail to the right. We are going to continue left towards Northville, which the sign says is 15.15 miles, though I think it's a little further than that. But we're 2.5 miles into our day, just stopped for a swig, and we're going to continue. Once we arrived here, and knowing the next tent site is another 3 miles further down the trail, I was happy with our decision to stay at Silver Lake last night. Instead of bringing our tents and pushing further to get to either the Rock Lake campsite or the West Stony campsite, it just confirmed in my brain that we made the right decision, because in my mind, at the end of the day, those final few miles can really drain you and then make the following day even more challenging, as opposed to stopping a little earlier and waking up much fresher. So it was the right call given the mileage. I mean, yesterday still was a 15-mile day. So while it was on the shorter end, it's still 15 miles. But we continued on from Rock Lake. We were a few miles away from our next landmark on the map, which was the West Stony Creek campsite. During this portion, we passed a couple of guys who were fully prepared for the bugs, covered head to toe. They had the same idea we did, which was to try to get as many miles in today early before the bugs get real bad. These two were also amazed that we were going from Silver Lake all the way to Northville in one day, as they started in Northville and they were on their third day at this point. So it really is a long push, and if time allows, I definitely recommend breaking up these 24 miles, but time didn't allow for me, so, had to do it in one day. The woods are just such a different vibe. Nope, there's a toad. The woods are just such a different vibe now, with leaves on the trees. Nice bright green everywhere. It's just such a different look from what I've experienced thus far, so it's making this last section unique from a visual perspective, big time. It also makes the trail a lot easier to see when the green leaves are on the trees. The trail's easier to follow, I find, at least thus far. About to cross over this little river, continue south to Northville. We continued hiking southeast towards Northville, and we came to the Godfrey Road Trail junction at West Stony Creek, where there was a large group and a number of tents set up at the campsite. So it was definitely a good thing we didn't opt for the long push yesterday to this site, because we would have been joining about a dozen people at the campsite. Nice big wooden bridge high up over the river, which is cool. Godfrey Road is 1.5 miles that way. So that's the junction that we are currently at. Woods Lake is 6.3 miles away, which is kind of the halfway point for our day. So we are 25% of the way done with our day.